Ron and Fez show. 10 years, believe it or not, 10 years since Kurt Cobain left the planet. 866-277-4969. 866-277-4969. Talking about it all 10 years after. It's hard to believe 10 years went by that fast. Fez and I were working in radio at the time, and it was such a major thing, especially for some of the younger kids, because I remember the radio stations used to run spots of if you're having trouble dealing with this, if you want to talk to somebody, because believe it or not, and it's hard to remember 10 years after Kurt killed himself, there was suicides going on around the country of these young kids who were so into Nirvana. 866-277-4969, and they wanted to follow Kurt down that hole.
And the big giant mobs that were turning out in Seattle, where they played like what, an audio tape of Courtney Love telling people not to kill themselves?
Well, it was Courtney Love was basically reading Kurt's letter to her, was the big deal there. And she was much of a mess then as she basically is now. The last 10 years have been probably a blur for Courtney as well. So we'll open up the phone lines to that. Was the guy a genius? Is he going to be remembered strong? Is he just going to be a footnote in the rock thing? Because basically, one of the things about what kind of band you have after those first couple of rushes of rock and roll bands, whether it was the 50s with Elvis, the 60s with the Beatles and the Stones, the 70s with Springsteen. Far and all into it, we've been into the rock thing for so long now, I'm not sure you can still have that kind of impact anymore.
866-277-4969 is the toll-free phone number.
866-277-4969. We'll talk about that tonight. Also, the monster, Fezzi, he found out, he went down and had his court date, so we'll be talking about that later, whether or not he gets to see his kid. My hope is no. I know he wanted to take his kid. My hope is no, not at all.
Don't trust your son to no backwoods Southern lawyer. We'll see what happens with him.
I remember coming home on the night that we found out that Kurt passed away.
Oh, so now it's going to be about you and your memories and what it means to Wonder Boy. Well, first of all, do you really view it as Kurt passing away?
Well, suicide. But I mean, when he died, though, when I found out that he died, and it was,
were you into the grunge thing in a big way?
Big in a huge way. So I came home and my parents had on MTV in the kitchen, that kind of thing, and I'm like, why are you guys watching MTV? And my mom's like, the Nirvana guy killed himself. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I couldn't even figure those words in that order would mean anything. I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, yeah, he shot himself. And I was just standing there in my kitchen like, what? And that was like the first kind of like death that really affected me.
So it was one of these things where you really couldn't figure out your own feelings. You distanced yourself, much like you are now.
No, I was sad. I was immediately sad from that once I internalized the information, especially because they had just played near my house, and I wanted to go, and my mom gave me a hard time about it.
Yeah, did you go?
No, I didn't. And that was the first thing I said was, I'm like, well, I'm glad you gave me a hard time. Now I'll never be able to go see them.
Great. I saw him do Bleach. But anyway, that's a whole different thing. I don't want to get into a whole who's got a bigger one here. The point is, you were saying it affected you in a big way.
Yeah.
How about now 10 years later?
Yeah, it still bothers me. And I also think about, like, the next day when I went to school and stuff, and everyone's in the parking lot just playing Nirvana songs, like, in their car, kind of trying to take it all in. That whole scene of, like, kind of community grieving, I still think about, like, to the day, and it's really weird.
It's a very good point. It was a real community grieving thing, and only certain people have gotten that. I mean, John Lennon got one of those deals. Elvis got one of those. And if you go off beyond those three guys, I don't know if you could say any more. I'm not very sure about like a Hendrix and a Jim Morrison, but I don't think it was one of those days the music died like it was with Elvis and John Lennon and Kurt Cobain. 866-277-4969. We're talking about memories of Kurt How's it all going to hold up? Is it going to be as historical as some of these other deaths? It's 10 years, believe it or not. 10 years later, 866-277-4969. Black Earl is on with us. Hey, how you doing, Earl?
Buddy.
Hey, my buddy.
Hey, Black Earl.
Kind of weird. 10 years, huh?
10 years. Isn't that odd?
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of the beginning of the end in a way. I guess as far as like the whole... I mean, not just the grunge movement, just this whole thing. There's just like all these good young bands, and then it just kind of snowballed after that. It was
well, I mean, you could say that because that's where you are at this point in history, where maybe a band isn't going to affect you coming out like Nirvana. But for some of the other kids, the White Stripes, the Strokes, the Vines, I mean, the rock thing... Yeah, the rock thing is still there. It's not...
without question, but I mean, I don't know. I was early mid-20s when he passed.
So for you, that was the real big one.
Yeah, it was just like sort of like it's like this is bad.
Not Marvin Gaye.
Really bad, and because then Pearl Jam stopped touring, and and then grunge kind of became like a fashion statement, and it just kind of played itself out.
Well, people don't even remember this now because everything has a tendency to run together. But the grunge thing was playing itself out by the time Kurt did this, and it wasn't as big as it had been just a little while before. And it also
to reach a point of ridiculousness.
Yeah, and then also the corporations had kind of focused in on Seattle and signed all those people. So it wasn't exactly the same pure thing that it had been a couple of years before.
Yeah, you started getting like, some people call them clone bands.
Yeah.
Just, bands like Bush and remember Silverchair.
Sure.
I mean, which sounded pretty much like if Nirvana were 16-year-olds, and then I remember going by the window of Macy's on 34th Street, and they actually had like grunge wear.
Yeah, sure.
The tackling dummies wearing like flannel shirts.
Yeah.
And the Doc Martens boots.
Fez and I were in Florida at the time, and a lot of the people were wearing it. We're like, we live in Florida. It's 98 degrees every day. There is no... I appreciate the oversized baggy pants, but there's no reason you need to be wearing flannel. And in Seattle, they actually need flannel. That's why they started wearing it.
And it was kind of damp, and it was cold. I mean, Florida's Africa hot.
What about this, Earl? Better to burn out or fade away? Better to go away at 27, the way Kurt did, and become a legend, or hang around far too long and just end up becoming kind of a joke?
I like flaming out early.
Yeah, as long as it's not you. It's always better in your rock heroes.
You know what I mean.
But if not, I'd rather go, you know what, I want to hang around as long as Meatloaf.
The rest of us will at least want to be there for the 10th anniversary.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that, but, most people remember how you finished, not so much, the whole stretch of it.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not saying Kurt's death was, by any stretch of the imagination, glorious.
Well, Kurt went out, age 27, same age as Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, 27. So it's really an odd thing about that age, 27. If I was the agent of somebody and they were 27, I'd be watching them like a hawk that year. All right, thanks a lot, Earl. 866-277-4969. 866-277-4969. You're producing, so there's music in the background. It all sounds like a radio show. Here is Chris. Chris, you're on
What's going on, guys?
Hey, Chris.
You guys are talking about community grieving, and you named three, but you guys forgot Jerry Garcia, who was, I think, one of the biggest ones.
Well, Jerry Garcia, definitely one of the biggest ones in that community, in the community that he founded with the Deadheads. But it's not like Jerry went out early or people didn't have a good 25 years to brace themselves for Jerry Garcia. His was a long time coming, man.
That's true.
And people were going, I think the Jerry is dead rumor started in like 68, and he didn't die to the mid-90s.
That's true. I just remember where I was when I heard he died. The classic rock station there played, I think, nonstop for like 24 hours.
Yeah, a lot of the classic rocks, there was no doubt about it. He was very Very, very mourned there. 866-277-4969.
With Cobain, I mean, as shocking as it was it unexpected? You know, hadn't he just OD'd in Italy or something?
You know what? But you could say the same thing about just about anybody who's ever been in rock. You know, Perry Farrell was supposed to have died a bunch of times. I mean, like, if one of the Jackass guys OD'd and died tomorrow, you would say, okay, that's not unexpected, but you'd still be shocked. You still expect a lot of these young guys to pull up and out of it. 866-277-4969. Here's Craig. Craig, you're on Ron and Fez.
Hey, you guys.
Hey,
Cobain's not dead. He's just hiding out somewhere, some island.
All right, that would all make sense if they didn't find his body laying there. It worked for Jim Morrison because he wasn't here in the country when he died.
They paid him off.
Yeah, okay, paid him off. It's Eddie and the Cruisers. Everybody wants to believe that Eddie and the Cruisers thing, that he's going to come back. I'm going to tell you right now, I'll be shocked if he does. I'll be just as shocked as anybody. Janine, you're on Ron and Fez.
Are we lacking so many just legends that we are saying that Kurt Cobain was a legend in some way or another, and that it actually influenced kids to commit suicide?
No, that actually happened. What does that say
about our society?
Well, Janine, that actually happened.
Well, I understand. That's exactly what I'm saying, that it happened. And our kids then were so influenced by some guy who's saying that they took the road to suicide.
You grew up in America, right?
Yeah.
You understand the power of pop culture. It just didn't happen when James Dean died in the 50s. The same kind of thing happened.
I understand the power and the influence of pop culture, but I also think that this is telling of who we are as a society, and that we are that weak that we allow a death or a suicide as someone like a pop culture icon to actually influence us and take in our own lives.
I don't think you have any idea, now that you've moved on a little bit, what it's like to be young and you're kind of distanced from the rest of society, and you have this one hero. You go in your room with that CD, you listen to it over and over and over again. Only someone who's in their teen years understands that kind of thing.
I understand, but then we have to look at us globally. We are talking about teenagers in the U.S., and then look abroad and look at teenagers everywhere else and what they're doing.
Honey, teenagers in other countries will strap a bomb to their ass and run into a synagogue. There is nothing on the earth as crazy and as scary as a teenager.
I absolutely 100% agree, but what I'm saying is, how does that reflect on our society in that music powerful? Kurt Cobain, one of the best musicians ever.
All right, so your point to this whole thing is kids shouldn't kill themselves.
Well, yeah, that's simplistic.
Yeah, that's an easy one.
Absolutely, but then, I don't know why I'm always compelled to call your show, but it's just like your conversations are one of the best conversations ever, and it's not even like because it's so deep or anything. It's just fun conversations, and I'm always compelled to call. I always want to talk. But this whole conversation about Kurt Cobain and how he influenced the suicides of so many other teenagers out there has me thinking, saying, God, what kind of society, shallow?
Well, when you come up with the answer, you call us back. Instead of just having that same kind of Oprah audience type thing, when you have an absolute answer and you want to give something in rather than the quick, easy, we don't need the Columbine type of killers. Yeah, then we'll all sit down and listen. 866-277-4969. Here's Scott. Scott, you're on Line of Face. Yeah.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, Scott, go ahead.
Hey, is that girl against landmines, too?
Yeah, I think she is. I think she's out against landmines, and she wants to let us know that it all starts at home, and the mothers are the real heroes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, all I wanted to say to her, I mean, it's easy to look back. I mean, as somebody like myself who's in their mid-20s now, and rationalize it and say,
absolutely.
Oh, well, as a kid, I shouldn't have thought like that. But as a kid, when you're an adolescent, I mean, when somebody's singing about despair and depression the way that you're feeling, you connect with that.
There is no
and they
way.
take your voice away.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, obviously, you're going to feel a sense of loss, and you don't know how to deal with that.
There is no way to understand once you get out of that window of what a Kurt Cobain meant to certain people, what a John Lennon meant to certain people in the 60s, what Tupac meant to people in the rap community. It's very difficult. It's very, very difficult for people to remember that, to remember what it was like to really have heroes. I mean, I have people now who I go, I like this, I enjoy this person's movie. I could never, it's impossible for me to get totally wrapped up in something like that again, like I felt when I was younger. And fan, it's short for fanatic, and there are really fanatics out there.
Is there a person now that if they killed themselves, teenagers would likely take their own lives? Is there anyone out there right now?
Here's I can't say that because I'm not a teenager. Here's Sarah. Sarah, you're on Manifest.
Hey
Sarah.
guys. Oh man, I was a big Nirvana fan, and I was sitting on the bus listening to my Walkman, and everybody turned and looked at me because I apparently looked mortified because Don and Mike were talking about how Kurt had died, and they were like, what's wrong? And I was like, well, Kurt Cobain died, and they were like, no way. And it was just the whole bus got all silent because, we were just a bunch of teenagers influenced by this music, and when he died, it was just so horrible,
Yeah. And you know what? It's really true, especially when you're at that age where kids were just standing in the high school parking lots. Suddenly, the principals had to figure out what to do about it. El Jefe just wrote an interesting. Selena dying in Texas was crazy. When Selena, the star, was murdered, I had no idea who she even was until she got killed. But at that time, to kids in the community, it's become really, really scary. Here's Peter. Peter, you're on Manifest.
Hey, guys.
Yeah.
When Elvis passed away, my mom's sister, in her 30s at the time, attempted suicide, and luckily there was somebody showed up to help. But I think that, a certain former Mouseketeer who, passed away, which as somebody who's witnessed her partying habits, I think if she passed away, there'd be a lot of teenage boys and girls that would have problems with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't really say that for sure. I mean, here was Elvis. He was far past his prime, and the country stopped when he died. When John Lennon died, I mean, the world stopped. There was things where there was moments of silence where the radio stations didn't broadcast for a full minute. People really lost it. 866-277-4969. 866-277-4969. We're talking about 10 years now. It's been unbelievable to me because it went by like a shot. 10 years. Kurt Cobain dead. Here's Igor. Igor, you're on Manifest.
Yeah, I think a woman called saying he wasn't a legend. I mean, this guy, Nirvana was probably the most influential and important band since the Beatles. And I think he was a legend no matter how he died. If he died of cancer, I don't think, it would make him any less of a legend than where he killed himself. And people, are still going to be hugely upset by that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was 14 when he died, and, it ruined my life, I couldn't even believe it. And to this day, I still look back on that. I mean, I've totally moved on. I don't listen to music that's like that, but I just think, what could Nirvana have done, to change music?
Yeah.
Revolutionary.
All right, thank you very much. People really have trouble remembering, and I admit that a lot of this stuff is just talking about popular culture. But Nirvana changed radio at the time. Bands that were being played heavily before Nirvana came out were seen as very cheesy after Nirvana came out. At that time, even videos changed. Suddenly, you started to go all different kinds of bands out there that wouldn't have been played on the radio just before. And a lot of it, not even good. A lot of it, they just go, all right, now we need to sift through this thing. But they very much did the same thing the Beatles did, where suddenly English bands were hip. They suddenly did the same thing for Seattle bands. And I know if you're not at a certain age, it's very difficult to see that as mattering or being important or anything else. Here is Albert. Albert, you're on Run of Fez.
Guys, you know what? For one thing, we're talking about Nirvana here. I mean, they were all right, but they weren't a spectacular band. And let's not forget that Nirvana killed heavy metal, and I never, ever forgave Kurt Cobain or the band for that. I mean, heavy metal was everything, and they destroyed it.
You know what? You're absolutely... That was pretty much the point that I was trying to make, Albert. And it's not so much what your own personal thing was, but that was huge, where the year before, Poison is playing in stadiums 6 months after Nevermind came out. They were playing in clubs. It was that huge.
Check it out. I mean,
it destroyed all the hair bands.
You had all the top bands. You had, Bon Jovi, but then you had, like, Wasp and Def Leppard and, all the top metal bands, and they were just rocking, and Motley Crue, they were all kicking butt out on Sunset Strip. Then these knuckleheads come down out of Seattle and just totally erase MTV, totally erase the radio.
It's
and you don't
true.
They killed music stores. Remember when music stores used to be everywhere? You could buy records and all kinds of stuff. Nirvana came with that Seattle sound. CDs hit the market, and it was all over. Heavy metal was.
Well, I don't know. I think you remember that a little different. I think that CDs were already set up by the time Nirvana came along. But it's very true that entire L.A. Hair metal thing was dead, man. Was completely dead. And those boys were all shocked. They all sat around going, I can't understand what happened to my career.
Well, they immediately looked ridiculous with eyeliner and bouffants.
Here's Ben. Ben, you're on Run of Fez.
Hey, buddies, what's up?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, give you two perspectives. One, I was in Moscow when I'm 24 years old, and you were talking about John Lennon and how the world stopped. No one knew about Kurt Cobain over there. And two, the idea that being 24... and obviously looking for a job, I don't see how that kind of music could have affected someone so emotionally at that time. I just find it really hard to believe.
Well, again, you were what? You were how old, 24?
I was 24 at the time.
And I honestly think that in most cases, not in everybody's case, that's too far along. It's really teenagers. It's teenagers that really listen to music. It's teenagers that take that album. And, like, if I'll get a new album now, I'll play it what I think is a lot. It's nothing compared when I was in my teens, when I sat and read all the lyrics, when I looked at every picture that came along with the album. You are just nuts. But it's very, very difficult to realize sometimes even when you are hero worshiping. And, people saw it in this country, Dubs just brought this up, when Dale Earnhardt died. That was so much bigger than anyone expected at the time. A lot of times people, you have an attachment to them even bigger than you think. 866-277-4969. We'll take a break. We're right back. It's Ron and Fez. It's the Ron and Fez show. 10 years tonight since Kurt Cobain left the planet. 866-277-4969. 866-277-4969. It's kind of interesting from some of the calls and some of the IMs that I'm getting. Still a very controversial figure. It's not as universally loved by, quite a few people are like, hey, a lot of this stuff was simple. He got caught up in the corporate thing. There was no doubt about it that he was also part of a craze, as well as being a separate artist unto himself. Here's Ken, you're on Ron and Fez.
Hey, Ken.
Hey, buddies.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, listen, I totally agree with that. One of those previous callers that Kurt Cobain and Nirvana in particular killed heavy metal. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, it's not like it killed the best music that the world ever seen.
Absolutely, but you know what? It was time for metal to die.
It was time. Yeah, I mean, it was time for it to die on the scale that it was at, because it was totally out of proportion for how good it is. There was no possible reason
totally glam, totally clean, totally sterile. had no grunge. Grunge came along.
You know, there was no reason that Glass Tiger and White Lion and half of those bands should have been out there. And, you know, some of the better bands, their music survived. Some of the people who didn't get caught up in that, their music survives themselves. But, you know, and there are also people that were into the Seattle sound who will tell you, you know, oh, Kurt ripped off Screaming Trees or this or that. And again, if you're first, you get to, that goes a long way. And no one in the 60s is ever going to really give the Rolling Stones the credit, the Who the credit, the Kinks the credit, because no matter what they did or what you liked about those albums, the Beatles were first. And that goes a long, long way. Here's John. John, you're on Run of Fez.
Oh, hey, guys.
Hey, buddy.
I'm just, you know, listening to everybody calling in, and I got to say, you know, when John Lennon and Elvis Presley were killed, they were already superstars and legends, and everybody knew them. Where was all this about how great Kurt Cobain was while he was alive? I mean, what was so influential about his music? I just don't get this whole thing.
Well, we tried to explain, and I know that if it's not your music, it's not your music. Nevermind was a gigantic album. You know, it definitely was the biggest selling album that year. I'm fairly sure of that. And it came from literally out of nowhere. It came from as punk music never sold, never got airplay on this scale. It was just phenomenal at the time, and it changed the music industry.
One of the things that Nirvana did was that they made music accessible. Like, I was listening to that going, hey, they're not really that great at what they're doing. I could probably go out and do that. And that's one of the things that made them so great and so beloved and what made Kurt look like a genius.
Yeah. You know what? There's a lot to be said for that. There's a lot to be said for the kind of music that people go. And, you know, you could do it with different rap artists, where because they put out an album, kids started trying to rap themselves the day after. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that even if you don't like rap music, you got to love the fact that kids can make their own stuff up and do it themselves, because by the time you got to, and you know, I mean, it was like that with early rock and roll, but by the time you got to Pink Floyd and Yes and Jethro Tull, it was ridiculous. It was, you know, people stopped making music. After the punk thing, kids started to make music for themselves. Here's Matt. Matt, you're on Fez.
What's going on, guys? First off, it sounds like a lot of our callers skipped their teen years.
Yeah.
Second thing is, what that guy said 2 calls ago, he said that it killed heavy metal. Obviously, he's not a real metalhead, known as like the heavy death metal scene that's been around since 1986, but that's not what I'm trying to call about. The point I'm calling is Kurt was so amazing of a singer, his talent, but what was really a dark day to me, I got blown a dark day when he died, but when Lane Staley died from Alice in Chains, I was like a little schoolboy crying all day long. Because to me, I think his influence has never been topped.
Well, it's interesting. When Lane died, it didn't even get a lot of airplay. Forget television.
Yeah.
It didn't get a lot of radio airplay. And again, that's it's timing.
It was kind of sorry to
It's odd, but it's timing.
Yeah, it was kind of sorry to say, but he had always had a history of drugs. And it was just kind of one of those days when you're almost kind of waiting for it to happen, you know.
All right, thank you very much. Here is somebody wrote in furious with Wonder Boy. They were so great because they weren't so good. The logic is unbelievable. I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to back Wonder Boy up on this. If you take something simple and put it out there, there is something phenomenally great about simple things. The early Bob Dylan songs, again, Bob Dylan was one of those guys where people went, he can't really play guitar, he can't sing, and everybody who owned that album either started a coffee shop, marched against the war, started their own folk band. There's something pure and just brilliant and genius about something that is simple.
Wonder Boy, you should have stayed with it. And then killed yourself at 27.
Here is Ryan. Ryan, you're on Fez.
What's up, Ron? How you doing, Fezzy baby?
Hey, buddy.
Hey, man. I just wanted to pipe in as to why Nirvana was so important to us kids, I guess, at the time. I was a sophomore in high school, and it just seemed like it just brought actual a sense of empathy or a sense of something that was real. I mean, you had all these other hair bands like Warrant and all these other guys that you kind of suffered through the late 80s, and there was a lot of the underground Seattle stuff going on. And Nirvana was one of the first guys where the big industry cats said, okay, let's give them a shot. Let's see how they do. And Nirvana was the guy singing about, how to get laid or how to do this and that and the other. It was about that, that at the time when you're a kid and you're not the popular jock, you're not the successful guy, you're not making straight A's, and you really don't give a crap about school, you're just kind of just marching through life, it meant something to you.
Well, you know what? You came up with a lot of good points, and people forget that the other thing about Kurt was his hair was dirty, his skin was bad, he was skinny, his girlfriend was a mess, his life was a mess. There was nothing cool about Nirvana, and certain kids really held on to that tight. Certain kids really needed that. And those were the kids that had hit the hardest. 10 years. 10 years has gone by. It's like a high school reunion hitting you since Kurt Cobain left. Dave, you're on Ron and Fez.
How's it going?
What can we do for you, buddy?
Well, I'm just thinking, like, kids are just influenced by other teens. I shouldn't say kids, but teens are influenced by other teens. And it's like it started in Seattle and it just kind of snowballed, know? And not only that, we're basically infatuated with death. You know what I mean?
Well, death is huge for us. I mean, death is a big part of life. Everything that we think about, without death, you don't have life. So, teens, again, are focused on that. But the other thing about teenagers is, and you have a tendency to forget this the older you get, when you're in your teen years, you don't know who you are. You're trying for an identity, and quite frankly, most days you're not the same person you were the day before. And certain things change you. Sometimes it's not what you're like, but who you like. Who you like means everything at that age. If someone says, I like rock music, you put that person in a box. If you say to them, I like reggae music, they put you in a certain box. And if you go around looking at tables, lunch tables where kids get to eat lunch, a lot of times it's if they like music and what music they like. That's how they pull together. Here's Mike. Mike, you're on Ron and Fez.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Yeah.
Hey, I just want to let you guys in on, I remember when I was only in elementary school, and I remember when I remember hearing about his death, and to my generation, it was, I know this is extreme, but it was, related to, like, my parents' generation, of where you were when Kennedy died. I guess there was, I don't know, there was a correlation with, like, how his music affected people, like, in the early 90s.
How old were you, Mike?
Shoot, I was only, 10 years old. And I remember, I was influenced by music at a really young age, and I think it was the change, from the 80s into the 90s, with his style, it was the quote-unquote, this is the 90s. There was a whole change of style of music, from the late 80s rock to the early 90s, grunge factor. And kids really related to that because it was such a big change, and kids, a lot of kids just were in it for the change and the nonconformity, I think.
All right, thank you very much, my friend. Here is Sam. Sam, you're on Ron and Fez. How are you, buddy?
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
Cool.
All right, I was, when I was younger, I didn't know about Kurt Cobain or Kurt Cobain's death or anything. And right now, about 3 years ago, I got into Nirvana, and I got into grunge, I got into punk, heavy into punk and everything like that. And all thanks to Nirvana. And I'll tell you, the reason why our generation likes Kurt Cobain is not, it's really because the girls get into it because he's cute, all right? The reason why I'm into it and why a lot of people are into Kurt Cobain and Nirvana is because of the lyrics and how he was as a person. He was just a regular Joe. You know what I mean? Like, he could have been your friend, Ron's friend, your friend, anybody's friend. And the fact that he died because of heroin is so cliche, but, hey, he could have been one of us, and he was one of us in a sense.
I really don't think that he died from heroin. I think he did heroin because he was a depressed guy. I think that, he was always self-medicating. 866-277-4969. 866-277-4969. Here is John. John, you're on Run of Fez.
Guys, I think that Wonderboy is absolutely right. I've heard that some of those bands didn't even have 6 strings on their guitars.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? Anyone who really likes rock music and really likes the simpleness of rock music, it's not as complicated as everybody thinks it is. It's really 3 chords. It was 3 chords in the 50s, and people have hits with those same 3 chords now. The White Stripes are kind of an interesting thing about that. They don't even have a bass. Who would have even thought all these years? All right, instead of adding instruments, take one out. Take out an instrument, and you're still... And people go, well, that kid can't play guitar. I know. I'll sit down and say this, though. He's rocking. He's rocking and rolling. I think he put the roll back into it. My big problem with rock and roll is when they dropped the roll. I think it was a huge mistake. Here's Terry. Terry, you're on Run of Fez.
Hey, buddies. Ron, Fez, love your show.
Yeah, it is good.
Hey, I was going to ask you about Ben Queller. You were talking about people that were coming up that, you know, might affect kids if they checked out. I just saw a show this kid put on at the 930 Club, and they've been touring for 2 years now.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal young player. Yeah.
Incredible following. They just, I mean, kids singing the songs, just a whole gamut of people there. Older people, young people.
Yeah.
He's really into this. He's really a performer. And
I agree. But, again, he doesn't have that certain hype yet. I mean, I'm not saying that he won't get it. And remember the Bleach album, they were playing to 15 people in clubs. But you never know when it's happening. The weird thing of Nirvana is whatever that blessing is that comes down about once a decade or so, it hit Kurt in the forehead. Now, people might act like I don't like him, or I didn't relate, or I thought it was a bunch of jive. But you know that this guy got whatever blessings there was to get from the rock gods. The same way the Beatles did, the same way Springsteen did, the same way U2 got hit. And not everybody gets it. It only comes down every once in a while. And most of the time, you don't know why it happens. Talent is only one part of it. Here's Chris. Chris, you're on Run of Fez.
Hey, buddies.
Hey, my buddy.
Hey, I just wanted to make a comment about dude that said something about girls liking Kurt because he was cute. That's not true. I was 21 when he died, when he kirked out. Yeah. And I personally, I like my men that bathe, but he was a landmarker. He was the guy that started everything. And heavy metal, it was already on 3 legs. It was a dying horse. Somebody had to shoot it.
You know, you're probably right about that. And a few people have brought that up to me. Mikey Steele's even did as well. But that thing was ready to go out. For all the people holding stuff, there were so many bands, the Rats and all, that got way too much popularity, way much more than they actually deserved.
Bon Jovi knew to cut his hair.
Bon Jovi, you could actually say that he had the songs to back him up. I mean, no matter what you say about him, or whether you like him or not, he's still around today. Here's Sean. Sean, you're on Run of Fez.
Hey, what's up, Ronnie? What's up, Fez?
Hey, buddy.
Hey, I just wanted to say, agree with the girl that just called. We couldn't, I'm 28 now, and we couldn't relate with the Manowar and the Norse God heavy metal stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
The Thor Viking crap.
Yeah, it always gets a little, the whole Valhalla thing. Even with Led Zeppelin, I go, I don't know.
Yeah, Led Zeppelin could pull it off. that was about it. But Kurt was us, man. He was the loser kid in the Chuck Taylors and the flannel shirt when it wasn't cool, just scribbling weird garbage in his notebook. And, when Nevermind came out, it was it. It was, we were all in high school and junior high, and he spoke to everything that we were feeling and thinking about, man. The music was simple, like Wonder Boy said, but it was it. It really was what we all were, walking in the halls with our skateboards, and it was time for Motley Crue and all that garbage to go.
All right, thank you very much, my friend. I didn't think the crew was going to take it so hard tonight, but what can I do? 866-277-4969. 866-277-4969. Here's Brian. Brian, you're on Run of Fez.
Buddies.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian.
Hey,
Never called a radio show before, but this is a topic I felt like I wanted to call in about.
All right, well, I'm excited now. We're busting that cherry tonight just to hear what you have to say.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, Nirvana was the first band that I ever heard that I felt like was playing music for me. You know, when I was 12 years old, the best thing that I'd heard on the radio was, I guess, Led Zeppelin. And then Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, and it just blew my mind. And I didn't go the grunge route like a lot of people. I went the punk route. And, you know, I just started listening to stuff that wasn't on the radio. I started looking for music that I had to go out and find myself, and it wasn't fed to me. And it was really Nirvana and Kurt Cobain that started all that for me. And it changed my life for the better, I think.
You almost said her worst, didn't you? You were just still thinking, I don't know, maybe it's the worst.
Well, when he killed himself, I mean, I remember me and my friends drove around the Beltway all night. We went to Taco Bell, and we were just up all night, and we were listening to like bootlegs of the European 1991 tour. And I mean, I'm still a big Nirvana fan. I don't listen much anymore, but I mean, when I hear it on the radio, I turn it up.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think sometimes we forget what it's like to purely be a fan, to just be an absolute fan of something. And as you get older, you have other things on your mind. Some people have moved it over with sports. Fez is a Tampa Bay Bucks fan. We have people here in the building that are Redskins fan, where they literally live and die with that team. When you're younger, that's the place music can have for you. Sometimes it's music, and when you grab that band and you feel like, okay, this makes a little bit of sense to me, I'm going to maybe grow my hair out or shave my head or do whatever it feels like just to make it through those teen years. Because another thing is we forget the teen years and we think they're all like a Porky's movie. And I don't care how cool you were. Your life was never like a Porky's movie. You were more thinking about getting laid than you were actually getting laid. Sometimes music fills that void. Here is Jason. Jason, you're on Ron and Fez.
Hi, Ron and Fez.
Hey, buddy.
I just think that the reason Kurt Cobain is so famous is because he kind of held a mirror up to modern society. Like he was like the kid that was being produced, the kid who was addicted to the drugs, the kid who was depressed. He was like a symbol for what we've digressed to.
He really was a symbol. There was that great MTV awards where Axl Rose was screaming about beating Kurt up and was punching on his door. And the point was, Kurt really couldn't defend himself. He was the kind of kid in school the Kurt Cobains get beat up by the Axl Roses. He would have been beat up by Motley Crue. And I think a lot of people do hold on to that. Here's Brett. Brett, you're on Ron and Fez.
Hey, what's up, Ron and Fez?
Hey,
First-time caller. Love the show.
Thanks, man.
I'm actually calling because Kurt Cobain actually put out his notebook, and it's actually in like book format. It looks like a Mead book, and you can buy it.
First of all, Kurt didn't put that out.
Well, yeah.
Courtney put it out.
Right. But there's a quote in there that is kind of cool. He talks about hip hop music actually, and he gives props up to hip hop and rap music. How they were one of the first types of music to come out and actually, regenerate music altogether. And it's just weird, someone like Kurt Cobain coming out and saying something like that. And he actually wrote it in the book and said, hey, hip-hop has been one of the greatest things ever out there, and, one of the more revolutionary things in music. And you got to admit, basically it is. Besides, your alternative spin-off and stuff like that, but I just think it's kind of weird how he...
if you ever really look at it, it's normally the fans fighting about what kind of music that they like. But when you really look for the people that you like and the people that you think are pioneers, they have a tendency to see what there is in blues, what there is in jazz, what there is in hip-hop, and they're able to see through a lot of those labels and just find good things. All right, we're going to take a break here. Fezzi, I know you got a game show you want to play tonight. It's Sopranos product placement game.
From last night's episode on HBO, couple product placements last night.
All right, give us a call if you're a Sopranos fan, 866-277-4969, 866-277-4969. For me, this was my kind of Nirvana. The Sopranos, and in that first season when they killed off Big Pussy Bumpin' Cero, I cried like a baby, and it took me 2 weeks to get over it. I knew he needed to die. He had no right to wear that wire, but I miss him completely to this day, and I think the show does. All right, give us a call. You're a Sopranos fan. We'll put you in our big-ass prize closet. What we got to give out tonight for this, Wonder Boy? You got something cool?
Yeah, tonight we have Vermont Teddy Bears. They have a brand new Easter cow bear.
All right.
Vermont Teddy Bear.
Perfect. We're playing a Mafia game show, and you give somebody a teddy bear. Well, these are nice teddy bears. It's great to give to your chick. 866-277-4969. We'll take a break. Sopranos fans, give us a call. We'll be right back. It's the Ron Fez Show.